Hey everybody, I am Dora Dernovich, Realtor at Coldwell Banker, Hickok and Boardman in the beautiful state of Vermont. Today I wanted to talk about sort of a big general topic of what are the steps in the home buying process. It's kind of a long video. I'm happy to break it down for anyone in future videos, but I'll just go over everything and hope you get something out of it. So there are sort of two first steps you can take. They're interchangeable. It doesn't quite matter which one you do first. And those are meet with a lender or get pre-approved with someone who does lending, and meet with a realtor. The lender option first will help give you an idea of your budget and whether you're even in the market to buy something right now. A lot of online calculators don't always give a clear picture of all the really localized specific closing costs and the taxes and insurance that you might find for a property here in Vermont. And so it is very important to talk to someone. Don't just go online and say, hey, can I afford this payment based on my income? Because you also might not want to spend as much as you are approved for based on the monthly payment. So a lot of people will start with the monthly payment that they're comfortable with and say, I want that to include my mortgage payment, my taxes, my insurance, and then how much money you have to put down for a down payment. And then the rest of that, if you're approved for a certain loan amount, will create your budget. So your down payment plus whatever the loan amount is that equates to that monthly payment you're interested in sticking to, that is your pricing budget. Then the next best step would be to meet with a realtor. And meeting with a realtor is super, super important. Do not just click on links online and go view properties. You're really gonna miss some important information and steps in the process if you do it that way. It's really easy to get caught up in the excitement of homes coming on the market and click on Zillow or Realtor.com or an agent's website. But you're hopefully going to be working with this agent for potentially a while. You might get lucky and find a home right away, in which case you're only working with your realtor for a couple months. But many people, especially in this market, they could look for homes for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years even. I've certainly had clients that I've looked with for a long time. It all depends on that person's situation. So you really want to be comfortable with the realtor that you are working with. You're going to spend a lot of time with them. You have to be able to trust each other. You have to know kind of how they operate, what their styles are, what their communication styles are like, and if you're going to be a good fit both ways. They have to make sure that you're a good fit for them as well. Everyone's different, different personalities. I think that the best way to find a realtor would be through word of mouth as one option. So if you have friends or family that have used someone that they really enjoyed working with, meet with them, interview them, see if you're a good fit. You can also do some online research and read bios to see who might have similar interests to you or lifestyles, different common aspects of your personalities maybe. Read reviews, that's super important, what their experience level is. Just because someone is new doesn't necessarily mean that they're not as good of an agent as someone who's been in the business a long time. So it really depends on who you are as a buyer. I recommend, having a consultation with a realtor, maybe multiple realtors. You can have interviews with 2 or 3 and then select who might be the best fit for you. Now, when I talked about the lending option, getting pre-approved first, it doesn't mean that you have to pick a lender necessarily right away. It's a little bit different than picking a realtor. With a realtor, if you want representation, you sign a contract with them. I'll get into that in a minute. With a lender, it's also important to shop around and, find someone that you're comfortable with and trust. You're not going to necessarily see them day to day as much as you will your agent, but, they're going to be handling a pretty important aspect of your purchase. So you definitely want to have faith in them. You want to see what their rates are, what their closing costs and fees look like, what's their communication style, how's their customer service, are they available on weekends or not? Is that important to you? But you don't have to necessarily pick the actual lender that you will get the loan from really until after you go under contract for a property. So that is when you need to lock in whichever lending option you're going to go with. Obviously you don't want to waste people's time, so try to be, pretty good about sussing out the options during the process, and maybe pick like two that you might go with. Once you have a pre-approval or a pre-qualification letter and you're comfortable with those numbers and you understand them, and once you have picked a realtor, it is a good idea to maybe go out with that realtor to see some homes. You could do that before signing a contract, or you could sign a contract if you're comfortable with them right away and go look at properties. What I do is I meet with buyers at my office. We have a consultation. We go over basically all of this information for probably about an hour, sometimes less, sometimes more. And we'll go over their criteria, kind of come up with expectations and what's realistic with the home process, the search for what they're looking for. And then I will set up a saved search in the MLS. I have another video that talks about the MLS and the saved search functionality of it, but it is a really good tool to use a saved search from the MLS directly versus a major website, because you're going to get accurate information and details about the listing, and you're also going to be able to see the associated documents with that listing. And it is an instantaneous notification that you get via email when a new property that meets your criteria comes on the market. Then it's a matter of staying in touch with your agent. So I say to people, if you see something you like or multiple properties you want to see, reach out to me, let me know some times and days that you're available to view the property. As quickly as possible is best, because in certain markets homes can go really quickly. So if you are waiting till the weekend or the end of the week or next week, the property might be under contract by then. What I do is I check the showing instructions for that property, see if there's any other notes that the buyer should know about, check and see what compensation they're offering out to buyers agents, and then we can find a time that works for everybody to go view the property. Now, I mentioned the representation contract. So we can view properties without that in place. There is a disclosure that you're supposed to sign, or at least be presented with, from the agent that you're working with. Whether you're in a contract with them or not, there's a one-page disclosure that they have to give you that says right now you're not represented, you're a customer, not a client, and therefore you get treated honestly and fairly. All material facts are disclosed. You just don't get confidentiality and fiduciary duty until you enter into a contract to become a client. So if I go out with a buyer and they're a customer unrepresented, because maybe they just want to feel it out first before they enter into a contract with me, I can show them properties as customers. I just can't advise them when we're at the property about how to best structure an offer, how to negotiate. I can't say this property's overpriced, anything that might be detrimental to the seller or their agents, because in that moment in time, if I'm not representing the buyer, I am by default a sub-agent of the listing agent, the seller's agent, or it's my listing perhaps, and I'm representing the seller directly. I typically say, let's go, maybe a couple properties, a couple times out as a customer if they're unsure. And then by that point, they should have a pretty good idea, or I should too, if we want to work together. And at that point, I would say, let's enter into a contract for representation. We call it a buyer-broker agreement. The full legal name of the contract is the exclusive right to represent buyer agreement. Now, if we sign that at that point, or maybe right after the consultation before we go to showings, then the next time we go to properties, I can give you my full opinion on the property. I'm not an inspector, I'm not a contractor, electrician, anything like that, but I can give you my comments on, generally like how marketable it is it overpriced, is it underpriced, any red flags that might pop up, that could affect the value or a future buyer's interest in the property. The contract that we would have, the buyer-broker contract, is a legally binding agreement. It can be put in place for up to a year. It can be less, that's up to, the buyers and their agent to negotiate. I like to do at least 6 months because the process can take that long, unless they want to do a limited time agreement just for testing out the waters with me. That's fine too. So under that agreement, we have to both sign it to make it legally binding, and we would both have to agree to terminate it if we wanted to end that relationship. So both parties have to agree in writing to terminate any buyer-broker contract, just like a purchase and sale contract. There's compensation attached to any contract. So our fee for representation would be listed in that buyer-broker agreement, and that is a buyer responsibility. Sometimes that can be offset by a cooperation fee, we call it, or commission that's being offered out by the seller or the listing agent for that property. And if there's any gap in what our fee is and what's being offered, that would be a buyer responsibility. Same thing for like a for sale by owner. So I can only show properties to for sale by owners to buyers who are clients, not customers. Because if I'm showing a property and there's no listing agent on the other end and I'm not representing the buyer, I basically have no role or place there. I'm not advising anybody. So like with for sale by owners, commission wise, it's a buyer responsibility for us to get paid as buyer's agents, but we might be able to negotiate that with the seller to help with sort of the cash flow of that. So once we have the contract in place and that's super clear, we've got the save search set up, now we're out looking at properties. Home showings typically take like 20 to 30 minutes per property. So if we're viewing multiple properties in a day, I'll come up with an itinerary and say, here's the times that we have to shoot for to arrive at each one. Some properties are a quick no and we're in there in 10 minutes. Some properties you might love and we're lingering a little bit longer. But we might have limitations with the showing schedule on how long we can be there. So we have to be pretty timely about it. What I like to tell people to prepare for showings is remove your shoes. So wear shoes that don't have a lot of laces or are easy to get off. Try to, if we're gonna be out all day, try to bring snacks and use the restroom, on the way there, like whether from your home or at a gas station or whatnot. We try not to use sellers' restrooms. We just don't want, want to make sure that we're not clogging anything or causing any issues. There sometimes is surveillance on at the property. We usually have a way of knowing that first, but I was going to be careful about, not being rude or disrespectful about the people living in the home or even the home itself necessarily. In general, you shouldn't be rude and disrespectful, but there also could be cameras or audio equipment on. So just be mindful of that. And when you're talking about, you might get into talking about an offer and details about what you want to offer the property, the owner or whatnot. So you definitely want to have those confidential conversations outside, somewhere else, at the office, to avoid any conflict or information getting out to someone you don't want to have it. Now, once we have seen a handful of properties, some people make an offer on the first one they see if they love it. Some people, need time to sort of get some context and properties under their belt to figure out what they like, especially if maybe there's two or more people as decision makers. Sometimes they have to get on the same page about things and what their priorities are for a home. Once we find a property that they like, we can talk about writing an offer for it. Now, in some markets, we might expect multiple offers on a property, in which case it's pretty important to be timely about the offer, and there might be offer deadlines that we need to be aware of. So, if you love a property, I say let me know so I can tell the agent that we want to be kept informed if any offers come in, so that my buyers have an opportunity to make an offer as well. If that's not the case, and we don't really always know, how things will go, but take a day or two to think about the property and how much you like it, and we will talk about all the steps in the offer process. I have an email that I send out with sort of bullet points of the decisions that my buyers need to make an offer. But usually we'll also have a phone call or a conversation in person about it as well. So then what I do is I will draft the purchase and sale documents. So we don't do any sort of like offer letter or preliminary contract. We pretty much fill out the purchase and sale contract in its entirety with the terms that you want to offer to the sellers. That can include purchase price, closing date, contract deposit or earnest money, which would be held in escrow until closing, what your financing details are, like how much money you're putting down, what kind of loan you're getting, whether you want an appraisal as a contingency, and then any other contingencies you might want, meaning inspections, radon test, air testing, water testing, heating system testing, all those sorts of things. And for certain properties, there might be other random contingencies that you would like to include as well. Sometimes a seller is looking for a contingency, such as suitable housing. So in the listing, they might say, contingent upon finding suitable housing, which means that the seller is saying, I'll agree to your offer and contract once we come to agreement on the terms, but I need X amount of time to find another property to go to, and I can only sell you my house if I find another property to go to and that contract stays together. On the flip side, if as a buyer, this isn't your first rodeo and you own another property, you might have a home sale contingency. So we would write in there that you need to sell that property before you can close on this one. Sellers don't always love those contingencies if they don't know the market that you're in, or maybe don't have faith that your home is going to sell quickly for various reasons. So that's sort of another conversation we'll have if that is the case for somebody. And I try to find that out up front before we go out to view properties so that we can set those expectations. Once we come to decision making on all of those terms that it's the buyer's decision to make, I fill in the documents with the other contingencies and the terms that they'd like to offer. The buyers sign it. We do everything pretty much digitally via a program called dotloop. We can do it in person on paper as well, but most people use dotloop. And the buyers would initial and sign all the documents. I would then create a summary email to present to the listing agent or a seller if there's no agent, and submit that with the contract, the offer, to them. The seller and their agent will then review those terms. If it's just your offer, they'll review them, take a day, maybe 2 days to get back to us usually. They might have some counter offer terms. So they could counter offer, they could accept your offer as is, or they could decline it and not make any counter offer terms. If you make a super low offer or something unappealing to them, they might just decline it outright. If there are multiple offers, then we probably will get wind of an offer deadline. So they might say, thank you so much for your offer. We just got another offer, and we're expecting more. And so I know you put, this time and date as your expiration for your offer, but if you want to be considered, please give us until Tuesday at 6 p.m. to compile all the offers that we may get. And then the sellers will look at them all, compare all the pros and cons of each one, and hopefully pick an offer by a certain date and time. And that's when we'd find out whether we got the deal or not. If your offer is accepted, then the seller will sign it. There might be some changes with the terms if they do any counter offering, and I, as a buyer's agent, would make those changes probably. Have you re-sign it, and then the seller will sign it. And once they deliver that back to us, you are officially under contract to purchase the home. And what that really means is you say, I'm legally bound to buying your home, seller, with the contingency that I get my financing, the inspection passes, XYZ other contingencies you might have in there. So once we're under contract, I say, congrats. And now the work begins to get through the contract contingencies. So the buyers will work on the financing piece. I will send the contract to their loan officer or multiple loan officers if they are shopping around. And the buyer can get basically quotes, they call them loan estimates, from different lenders to compare, the fees and the rates and everything, and what programs might be best for them for this particular property. Simultaneously, we will be doing things like ordering the home inspection or any other testing that's being done. Licensed independent inspectors are what we recommend here. I can give you a list of people I've worked with and had good experiences with, but the state has a whole list, like many people on there, of options for inspectors. maybe your friends and family have a recommendation. So you're free to choose whomever you want for an inspector. Do your due diligence there as well. See what their fees are, how thorough their testing or their inspections are, what their reports look like, because that's a pretty important piece of the process as well. So your financing is kind of moving along and you're working with the lender on that. I'm going to be giving them any addenda that we might have to the contract along the way. I will attend the inspection with you and any other visits to the property that are relevant. The lender will eventually order the appraisal if you have an appraisal contingency and financing in the contract. And we don't need to do anything for that. They just go to the property on their own or with the listing agent. And we will potentially negotiate more terms if the appraisal doesn't come back at value, if the inspection was not satisfactory to you, any other contingencies weren't satisfactory to you, and we have to stick to certain dates in the contract to do these things. So really what's at stake here is your deposit mostly. So your earnest money deposit or contract deposit, I called it, which is being held in escrow by the listing agency. If you were to try to terminate based on inspection and you're after the, let's say, 14-day period for the inspection, you might have a hard time getting out of that contract, or at the very least lose your deposit. There might be further legal repercussions, but typically at least your deposit will be forfeited in that case. So it's very important to stick to the dates. And I will send out a list of all those dates ahead of time so that we are all on the same page about the calendar of dates to keep an eye on for. Let's say we've gotten through all of those contingencies. Financing is clear to close, so all those conditions that the lender wanted are met. The appraisal's in, that meets value. The inspection's either satisfactory or you've negotiated some, repairs or concessions from the seller. Anything else is negotiated. So hopefully by a week or two before closing, we've got all of that wrapped up. And at that point, you will have selected an attorney to help you with the transaction as well. The attorney will do a title search. They'll go through the land records to make sure that there's no title issues or marketability issues for the property, and that the lender is okay with the title work as well. And then they will prepare the closing documents. So the attorney will work with the lender to prepare typically what's called a closing disclosure. A buyer gets a closing disclosure, the seller gets a closing disclosure. That will go through, similar to your loan estimate, all of your closing costs, all of the prorations, your down payment, what the loan amount is, and give you the bottom line of how much money you need to bring to closing. The seller will get a similar one to show how much they're getting from the sale. And so we will then schedule the closing. Closing day is the day it closes, it sells, the day you get the keys, bring the money. Right before closing, either the day before or morning of, we have the opportunity to do a walkthrough. The walkthrough is when we go to the property, buyer's agent, the sellers are gone, the listing agent's not there. The sellers have hopefully cleared the property of all their personal belongings and personal property. And it should look as if you're going to move in right then and there. It should be broom swept, clean of all miscellaneous things like that. So as long as everything's good at the walkthrough, there's no, unexpected holes in the wall or big items left at the property or small items that need to be disposed of. If everything is good there, we will then proceed to closing. And depending on the attorney's office, the buyer's attorneys who host the closing, the sellers also have an attorney, but sometimes they do and sometimes they don't come to closing. But typically, buyers are there, sellers are there, buyer's agent, seller's agent, and then your buyer's attorney. So the buyer and the buyer's attorney will go over all the paperwork that the buyer is going to sign. Sometimes the seller and their agent might sit outside the room at this point because it's a lot of, confidential personal information that the buyer goes through with their attorney, but sometimes you're all in the same room and everyone's just sort of chit-chatting. You will sign a probably large stack of papers. There's a lot of legal paperwork and all of that cannot be done digitally, unfortunately, so it all requires hand signatures. The seller will have a much smaller stack of papers to sign, and you will bring your check or wire your funds for the down payment. The lender will have sent their money to the attorney's office. So basically the attorney gathers all the money that is involved with the transaction. And then you will get the keys at closing, and everyone who is supposed to get paid at closing will get paid from the attorney's office as well. So the buyer's agent, the seller's agent, if there's commission being exchanged, they will get paid then. Tax bills, if there's like outstanding bills, those might get paid. Water bills, any other loans or debts that the seller has will be paid at closing. So if they have a mortgage, that will get paid off from the funds at closing as well. Once we do all that, you give them the money, you get the keys, and then legally the property is yours. So in a very condensed nutshell, that is the home buying process. I can go on for much longer for some of those topics, but that gives you basically a good overview of what it looks like. That whole process from going under contract to closing could be as short as 4 weeks. It could be 8 weeks. It could be an extended period of time if everyone agrees. So it really depends, and you will put that date in the contract so you know exactly when closing day will be. After closing, if there are any issues at the property, I am always here as a resource for my buyers and clients. Whether it's just silly questions that you wouldn't necessarily know the answer to because you've never owned a home before, or maybe there's a question that you might have for the seller, and I'll try to put you in touch or get information through the other agent to the seller. And any other resources I can provide. So, you might need an electrician or a plumber. We have some good contacts in the industry and through our company that I can recommend to you. But basically customer service for life. So I'm always here, and I really enjoy when people keep in touch with me and show me, updates they make to the home or before and after photos. I try to stop by if I can at some point after closing, say hi, and hopefully we keep in touch. So a lot of my clients become good friends in the end. So I love about this industry. If you have any questions on all of that, please reach out to me and I'm happy to elaborate. As always, thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy your day.